So greetings and welcome to today's educational program, How ISO Can Help Build Organizational Excellence by Jim Moran. This is your moderator, Doug Wood, with ASQ's Quality Management Division. So today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Jim Moran. Please join me in welcoming him. Jim is the president of Simplify ISO Incorporated, the Learning Alliance Incorporated, and founder of the International Management System Institute. He has been implementing ISO management systems since 1992 with Fortune 500 companies, small to medium-sized businesses, and the federal governments of Canada and Africa. He served on PC 280 to help contribute to ISO 2700, the 2017 version, guidelines for management consultancy services, a standard that was published for use as a guideline for people and organizations for the assessment of management consulting services. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Jim Moran. Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much, Doug, and thanks for all your help getting this organized and going over everything, showing me how to use this Cisco tool. It's been terrific working with you, and I sure appreciate everything you've done to get us to this point. And I'm glad to see a few people out tonight, a nice crowd. Thanks to all of you for taking time out of your Thursday evenings and I guess Friday mornings in the case of the Middle East. So it's great to have you along. And it's always more fun with more people, that's for sure. And as Doug mentioned, don't hesitate to put a question into the chat section or the Q&A section. Use the Q&A tab. And our plan is to answer them as we're going. If they seem to be related to the topic we're on, by all means, chunk them in. And then we'll also have a spot at the end. I'm planning to go for about 45 minutes or so, so we'll have some time at the end. And then, as Doug already mentioned, and possibly for those of you who aren't here yet, I don't have a hard stop in an hour, so we'll whoever's willing to stay for a further chat, I'd be happy to stay with you. So you may have seen the mailer, but the three topics we're going to be talking about tonight are how do ISO standards connect with quality awards. We're going to look at a couple of them. And how do I use ISO standards to improve processes, and how do I sell the use of ISO standards to leadership? That's probably the million-dollar question for sure. I did a poll on LinkedIn back in the spring and asked people what benefits the organizations gain from being ISO certified. It wasn't specifically ISO 9001, although the majority of organizations are around the world, about 1.8 million right now. But they, generally speaking, 70% found that they had more control over their processes, 17% better risk management, 13% higher customer satisfaction. And the good news is that no one who was certified had the sort of no benefit option that they chose. So it's great to hear that they're, after all these years, they're so useful. They've been around for over 100 years. 1890s, SGS was doing inspections in Europe of Canadian wood that got sent over there, exported from here. So it's not something that Doug and I just sat down with a case of beer and wrote up last week. These standards are well tested, and of course they're keeping up with changes, societal changes, and so on. ISO 45003 was just released, psychosocial health and safety in the workplace. So they're continually, and of course this is the 5th version of the standard that I've worked with. Used the ISO 9001 anyway. The 8794 version was the one I started with, and there was the 2000, 2008, and then the 2015 has been sort of the growth. It's been a really great change, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too. It's using the high-level structure. So as far as this first topic goes, the ISO standards connecting with quality awards, you can see the baldrins symbol on the left, and these are the Canadian Awards for Excellence here on the right. And you can see the headings and baldrins. For those of you who are ISO 9001 certified, you'll recognize these right off the bat. There's a leadership clause, there's a strategy clause that would be included in both the context and the planning part of ISO 9001, and all the high-level standards Customers, of course, are the focus for quality. Operations, the better you're controlling your operations, the more likely you are to get the results that you want. Workforce is part of the Clause 7, the support program. There's along with the workforce, inside that hexagon, you could also have the infrastructure that you have, your work environment, so on. Operations is Clause 8. Customers are in Clause 8 as well. And you can see in the center here, you're trying to integrate all these things together to get the results you want. And I love the way that in this model, they put leadership at the left to kind of show that leadership's input to this is really vital to the results that you get. And of course, you don't know how well you're doing if you're not taking measurements, doing analysis, and then keeping people competent through knowledge management. And some of the other things that we see here to reach this award, obviously 9001 would certainly get you started. You may want to add environmental requirements, 45,001 for health and safety, 45,003, 56,002 for managing innovation, and then 22,301 for managing business continuity. And the ones ending in 1, the number 1, you can actually get certified to. The others are guidance documents. 45.3 is a guidance document. They're not full of shells, they're full of shoulds, but they can still be very powerful tools to help you improve the help you improve the culture at your organization, make people aware that standards aren't so scary. But if you're trying to achieve something, here's something that you can use as guidance. And on the Canadian side, the Canadian Awards for Excellence, you can see similar awards: leadership, Clause 5, from the high-level structure standards, 9001, 14,001, 27,001, information security planning. Clause 6, customers are in Clause 8 with the operations people. Clause 7, within the support processes, customers and processes are together in Clause 8. And then partners, these would be your anybody you use from the outside to help you reach your goals. So there's lots of opportunity there to use current standards to help you find ways to move yourselves forward in the world of competition, developing, becoming really a really good employer, becoming the employer of choice, and you get to choose from the cream of the crop that way. And these same standards could be used to improve performance relative to the Canadian Awards for Excellence as well. Another thing to keep in mind are many other standards: customer satisfaction, managing assets, standards for sampling. And these last 3, just to note, there are 1,312 ISO standards at the ISO.org site for sampling. So if you have anything you want to improve about how you do sampling in your organization, check out those. Very good search engines there as well. And these last 3 have become pretty popular, and as the stories continue to show up in the news about so-and-so being infiltrated, so-and-so being hacked, this database being compromised, that this is the standard you would get certified to, is ISO 27001. It's called Information Security Management System Requirements. And then 27005 is a guidance document you would use in developing your information security management system. It's about risk. And then, of course, auditing the system would be something you'd want to take a look at, just to make sure you're approaching the auditing activity as well as you possibly could be. The ISO 27001 risk management tool is much like ISO 31000 if you're looking for some way to tune up your risk management activities, but it has specific things in there for information security that helps you keep your eye on the ball. So another thing to keep in mind is that whatever requirements you're trying to meet, there will definitely be an ISO standard out there to help you. And the other thing that many of you know who are here is that ISO standards never tell you how to do anything. I'm working with a client in near Toronto in Canada that services customers all over North America with rubber supplies. And the beautiful part of the business is they never handle the product. They have contractors in China that make the compound for them, and they ship directly to the customer. Quite a terrific upset in the flow, the product flow, or the supply chain in COVID, but they were able to move towards ISO 9001. They haven't certified yet because they have some resistance inside the organization, people thinking that it's going to change the way they do business. And I've tried to convince them that you don't have to change the way you're doing anything. You might have to tweak a few things, or you might have to add things like internal auditing, corrective action procedure, management review. Those kind of things aren't on everybody's activity plate right now. But all those things will definitely help. There's just no downside to having a formal corrective action system. It'll keep problems from recurring. So if you feel that your organization can benefit, we'll have some more ideas in here tonight for you on how to convince top management that it might be a good way to go. The ideal thing is to start implementing these things without telling anybody. I also encourage a lot of my clients not to use the word ISO because it has a few years of negative connotation from those situations that came about in the late 80s. Doug and I were talking about them before the webinar started. We used to be able to buy an entire quality manual on a disc, and all you had to do was change the name from your company to your actual company's name, and they're pretty much what gave ISO a bad name back in the old days. And all the standard, all the documented procedures that are required, some of them are still hanging around too. So based on where we are so far, has this quick little overview helped you imagine using any more ISO standards than you're using now? If you could use the chat box, tell us which ones you think might be a bit intriguing, and I'll have Doug keep an eye on the chat box and see if there's anything showing up in there.
Yeah. Folks, you can go ahead and type something into the chat window.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at that. So here's one person indicates sampling.
Good.
That's one thing. Another one says the 27,000 series for sure. And then one individual mentions, risk management by name. Don mentions 14,001, 14001.
Oh. Yeah, environmental standard, yeah.
There's business continuity is one mention. Another mention is information security, cybersecurity. 17025 is another thing mentioned here.
That's the calibration and lab testing standard. Just started one 3 days ago. We're doing an implementation here, and we have a whole lab. I guess you'd call it a lab, it's like a mall with different kinds of labs in it. It isn't quite like that. It's a whole group of businesses together. It's called the Innovation Park, associated with the University of Western Ontario here in London. And it's a very, very comprehensive standard, but very worthwhile. You get that particular standard you get accredited to. The others by an accrediting body. They're called assessors rather than auditors. It's a different level of complexity and a different level of diligence required too, but it's a great standard. Thanks.
And we've got another one here talking about the 10,004, the 10004 customer satisfaction.
Yeah, some good guidance there on how to build a customer satisfaction assessment program. Yep, it's a good one. We have yep, that's great. Thanks for all that. Anything else?
Our friend Dawn mentions no, we use an excellence model, which knowing her, definitely so.
Was that Dawn Ringrose? Is she with us tonight?
Yeah, she's attending.
Hello, Dawn. Thanks.
And then one series. Here's a long series of them from Jade. Integrated Management System 9001, 14001, 45001, 50001, 22301 certificates. She says set up, improvement, and certification of maintenance of the process model, data sheets, and all IMS documents. So that's a long post, but yeah.
Well, the beauty of Jane's comment is that it highlights the fact that with all those new standards she mentioned, 50001 is the energy standard, every new standard that's come out that you can get certified to, with a couple exceptions, 13485, they all have the same structure. They all have the clause 4 is context, clause 5 is leadership, 6 is planning, 7 is support, 8 is operation, 9 is measuring performance, and 10 is improvement. So if you start with any one of these, it's really easy to integrate all the other standards with it, as I said, except for a couple of exceptions.
Yeah,
so that's great. Thanks for that.
One person mentioned 13485 by name as well, and I understand that's medical devices. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's medical devices, and it hasn't graduated to the high-level structure yet, but I'm pretty sure the next version it will. And I'd just like to mention to Dawn's comment, any one or all of these, any combination of these standards could certainly help an organization meet her requirements, or follow her model, or could be used to take advantage of her model, because any organization trying to become excellent is going to be want to be working in mainly in probably all these areas we've talked about tonight so far. Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's pretty good.
All right. Thank you so much, and thanks for your participation, folks. So, along Don's comment, organizational excellence, you improve your processes to reach towards organizational excellence. So how do you use these standards? Well, there are a couple of straightforward ways to think about things, and one of them, of course, is the high-level structure standards with this clause 10 called improvement. And I think everybody here would agree that if you're not getting better in your organization, even if you're staying the same, even if you're not deep or regressing at all, it's going to feel inside your organization, it's going to feel like things are getting worse. If you can't demonstrate some kind of improvements, I've often said it's better to improve 100 things by 1% than it is to improve one thing by 100%. 100 things by 1% versus one thing by 100%. By improving one thing 100%, you may not touch all your areas of employment. You may not touch all your employees. If you pick 100 things over a time period, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and just improve them a little bit, it's quite possible that more people in your organization will notice it, and more people will feel as if things are getting better. And the other thing that Doug and I talked about before was this idea of improvement by some people might be seen as change. And we as humans, we love variety, but we're not always that keen on change. Doug, you had something to say about change and variety, I think. Remember?
Yeah. It was everybody wants improvement, but nobody wants change.
Yeah, and I guess it's because change has this sort of mystery to it. I've often thought that when I decide it's going to be different, I call it variety. If Doug tells me it's got to be done a new way, I call that change. And it's all about perception. It's all about how you present it. And of course, one of the main things to remember, many of us forget when we're trying to explain or implement a change, is we sometimes are really excited about how great things are going to be after the change happens. But it's always important to remember to show people how much of what they're doing now will still be done the same way after the change. I learned that from fellow who spent his life in the Navy, and he the last 4 or 5 years of his career there, he started doing workshops on innovation and change. And one of the things he taught me was that there's a lot less resistance if you can start out by showing people that the things that they like about what they're doing will still be there afterwards. And many, many years ago, I guess it was probably 1995, 96, a fellow teacher with that back then QMI, now SAI Global, Gary, I can't think of his last name, it'll come to me. He showed us this model in the lead auditor training class. And if you think of improvement as the goal, you'll get there either by looking at opportunities and implementing or working on them, finding the best way to take advantage of an opportunity, or from non-conformances. The non-conformances sometimes in organizations are not looked at as a wonderful thing, but they are. You're going to see a slide a little bit later. They literally are nuggets of gold. That's how you get better. And you find out where your opportunities are and where your non-conformances are by listening to customers, both your employees, your internal customers, and external customers. Audits can give you ideas on opportunities for improvement, and some audits will reveal a non-conformance. Metrics, any kind of metrics you're doing in your organization, and even with metrics, make sure that you make it as simple as possible, and only in the sense that you've probably seen the same thing that I have. Some organizations will gather buckets and buckets and buckets of metrics and then never use them for anything. And that can be very disheartening for employees who are being pressured to get some work done, but they have to stop and do this and do that and do the other. And then the work that they've done gathering this information never gets acted on or never gets used, never gets seen. So make sure that you choose metrics that are useful, relatively easy to take, but also metrics that will help you make business decisions. And of course, this is typically where I start with a new company if we're implementing something like ISO 9001. I imagine Don does too with the organizational excellence work, is that find out what they're doing now. We often use those for quality objectives, sometimes environmental objectives, health and safety objectives. Most people have those things kind of in their radar, kind of on their radar. Then finally, management review. And I've seen management reviews as long as a day, day and a half. I've also seen them as long as an hour and a half. So it's like life itself. The more you put into the management review activity, the more you'll get out of it, that's for sure. So this can be a little model if you're looking for a way to take a look at improvement, structuring improvement. And there's some guidance in the ISO 10004 as well that was mentioned earlier, that measuring customer satisfaction, there could be a little bit of information in there for you. This is kind of interesting, so I'd like to see how good your math is tonight. If you have a $1,000 error or mistake and you operate at a 2% net profit, how much revenue do you have to generate to make up for that $1,000 error? So get out your calculators, and we'll see who's the quickest on the draw with the chat. Thanks for helping us out with this. Anything showing up there yet?
Nothing yet. They're still trying to find the calculator.
Yes.
Okay, we have one number here.
Yes.
$50,000. Oh, someone else. 50,000.
Good. So this is going to come up again later in the presentation tonight under the heading, how do you convince leadership of the value of this? And your number could be different. You may operate at a higher net profit. If you're lucky, you may operate at a lower net profit. So just take whatever your net profit is, divide it into 1,000, and you'll find that in this particular case, $50,000, you got to have $50,000 in revenue to end up with $1,000 when you multiply it by 2% or 0.02. So that now that a $1,000 mistake is had, has been or has happened, your salespeople, they probably wouldn't even hear about it, but they need to now get out and sell another $50,000 worth of your product or service or combination in order to have $1,000 left over. Now, here's the problem. At that point, you haven't made any more money. And the other problem is this. Most of you visiting this webinar tonight would probably have mistakes in the $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 range, maybe higher even. So it's astronomical the impact that a mistake has. And it gets even worse when the mistake is repeating, because after a while, not only do you start losing money at a horrific rate, you start losing morale. And that's when things really take a turn for the worse. And I imagine in Don's program of organizational excellence, there are tools they use to sort of assess morale, and repeating mistakes is probably near the top of the list, along with poor communication, even not being clear on expectations when someone gets a new assignment, all those kind of things. But this particular one, people start to lose faith in your organization if you can't fix a problem. So another approach to improvement: identify a problem or an opportunity, collect verifiable evidence relating to the problem, and notice if you can keep focused on your customers, that definitely helps you work on problems that are going to have a good payback, a good impact on the positive bottom line. Carry out a root cause analysis, identify corrective actions and implement them, assess them for effectiveness, and if they weren't that great, go back and do it over. And then finally, review your risk analysis activities. If any of you are registered or certified to ISO 9001, you know that clause 9.1, clause 9 is a performance evaluation, but 9.1.3 specifically talks about things to measure to make sure you're including in your measurements, and 9.1.3e has you measuring the effectiveness of your risk management activities. In fact, in the corrective action clause 10.2, 10.2.1e wants you to go back after you've fixed the root cause or fixed the non-conformance. They want you to go back and ask yourselves the question: could we have avoided this if we had done a better risk analysis? And if you can be proactive, I'll just click back to this picture for a second. Notice the left side is the proactive side and the right side is the reactive side. This is the expensive side. And probably for every dollar you invest here on the left-hand side, on the proactive side, you're going to get a $4 return with a reduction in cost for reactive. And it's funny how top management often will be willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to reduce expenses, but they won't spend a nickel to avoid expenses. And that's a philosophy that needs to change. So as I mentioned earlier, non-conformances are nuggets of gold as opposed to being black marks against somebody's performance or a department's performance. They are the canary in the coal mine, and it's a great way to pinpoint things that can really help you improve your performance. And when your performance gets better, your profit gets better. So instead of using internal audits to find out if people are following procedures, use the internal audits to find opportunities to improve your results and improve risk management. Our internal audit form identifies the process, gathers up gives you space to write down the evidence you found, looks at all the support pieces, people, infrastructure, work environment. Now we've got two boxes at the end. You could do this with any of your checklists. Put the one box is to ask the auditee if they are getting the results they want from the way things have been designed, and the next one is ask them if they feel the risks in their area are being managed well. That really helps, and it gives you some sense of how well things have been implemented, It also tells you if you're paying attention to your employees, letting them have input into risks as well. Make sure you ask the question, what is the weakness in our system that allowed this to happen when it's a non-conformance? And that's again where if you look at 10.2.1E in ISO 9001, you'll see the reference back to checking your risk analysis, and that's how you determine whether it was a weakness. Don't forget, too, all the data since 1964, when Deming, Ishikawa came out with his fishbone root cause analysis tool, and even Deming previous to that, after World War in the 40s, 50s, they've all found that operator error is really only the actual root cause about 6% of the time. So 94% of the time you need to be getting out of the focus on the operator and even get to the point where you're asking what's going on here that didn't allow the operator to get the result they wanted. So follow the workflow, look for ways to improve your processes. I have a few clients that actually use a map like this, and they actually put dots on whichever step in the process has non-conformances. So when you see the dots piling up on one of these boxes, then you know you need to do a little work there. And definitely make sure you're talking to the people who actually do the work. They are your subject matter experts. So let's see if any of you have a structured approach to improvement. If you do have kind of what you'd call a structured approach, if you just wouldn't mind using the chat box, tell us what it is you use.
Okay, I'm watching the chat box now. We'll see what appears in there.
See if it lights up for us, Doug.
Yeah. We did have a question looking for an example of a $1,000 error in manufacturing.
Yes.
Stop a production line for 10 minutes to repair 50 bad items, or repair 300 bad items.
Yeah, that's probably more like a $4,000 or $5,000 error there for sure.
Well, it depends on what the items are, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting some notes in here. Okay, we're getting DMAIC. We've got several Six Sigmas here.
Oh, good.
Somebody has the 6S, which of course is includes
5S.
safety.
5S
with
plus
safety.
1. Yeah. Okay.
We've got lean tools like a Valley Stream map.
Yes.
We have a lean Kaizen, and another person just says Kaizen. Again, I'm not sure if that refers to the Japanese Kaizen, as in many small improvements, or whether that refers to the tear it all apart and fix it in 1 week, the Kaizen Blitz.
Yes. Yeah, either way, it would certainly be a structured approach to improvement. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that.
Oh, here's one. Customer complaints adds not the best way.
Good point. In fact, it is something, but this is a great point this person has made, is that if it got out of your place, I think those places would call it an escape. If it escaped and made it to the customer, then you have some work to do, that's for sure. And those are really expensive. Doug, you mentioned your 110, 100, 1 million.
Yeah, well, that's the Duran's rule of tens. He says if you catch it in planning, it's $1 or $2. If you catch it in setup time, it's $10. If you catch it in production, it's $100. If you catch it during full production, it's $1,000. If you catch it after it leaves your production line, it's $10,000 or $100,000, and lawsuits can be millions. So
yeah, that's a great one. You reminded me of whenever I do presentations on the process approach, input, process, output. You can use the 110, 100 rule. If you catch it, like you're saying, catch it in the input stage or the early stage, you can fix it for $1. If you don't catch it till it's being processed, now you've got time, materials, people's effort involved. It's 1 to fix it at the input stage, 10 to fix it at the process stage, and if it gets to the end of the process, it's going to cost you $100 to fix it. So use either of those models, and either of those models could be a good addition to what we're going to talk about at the end, which is this topic on how to convince management. Anything else in the box there?
Yeah, there've been a couple. One of them was actually kind of robust. Process assessments, then bring suggestions to an improvement team with reps from all departments, which is a nice broad-based one. One individual says it's great to use PDCA, which is an endless loop. That's the nice thing about that.
Absolutely.
One person mentions 8D, which is actually a problem-solving approach. But yes, if you fix a problem, it's an improvement, right?
Yep, it's definitely a structured approach to improvements. Thanks for mentioning that. I have a client that uses 8D as opposed to they call their corrective action process, and there's FMEAs and so on too.
Here's a good one. Don says, ready, shoot, aim.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Tom Peters, ready, fire, aim. It's great. Good.
Yeah, and who knows what you'll hit. So again, what Heather says, we use different approaches based on the situation. Of course, that's great too.
Yeah.
All right.
You have to be flexible. Yeah, that's what I talk about. Standard management systems, they need to be stable but flexible. That's a great comment, Heather. Thanks so much for that, because it reminds us that a rigid system that says you always must do it this way is not going to help you very much. Thanks. So the last topic, we're at about 6:43, so I'll wrap this up in 7 minutes here for everybody. How do you sell ISO standards? And I put sell in quotes because selling sounds like the snake oil salesperson kind of approach, and that's not what we're talking about here. Just sometimes leadership is focused on the shareholders. There could be focused on in external forces that they have no control over, and they might say, ISO, forget it. We're too busy just trying to stay alive. So one thing to keep in mind is that you have to know what your leaders in your organization really care about. And sometimes they'll say one thing and actually really care about something else. Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, back in the 80s and 90s, actually it was probably closer, maybe late 80s, 90s. He had a neat phrase that was that he was talking about leaders from the perspective of leaders talking to employees. He said, they will listen to your words, but they'll watch your feet. And that's what you have to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out what leaders really care about. You have to show how using standards can help move your organization toward its objective, or using Don's organizational objective program, organizational excellence program, Don, that anything with a structure can help you move your organization toward an objective. That happens tonight. We're talking about ISO standards, but and this can always help too. Put it down in black and white for them. $50,000 times 2% equals $1,000, and just run it backwards the way we did the first time, and show your leadership that a $1,000 mistake means that they'll have to create $50,000 in new revenue at 2% net profit in order to cover that loss that you just made. And it's important that new ideas don't have to be scary. In fact, the latest version of ISO 9001 has a clause 6.3 in it that is literally called change management. And if you just fire a change out into the organization and hope for the best, kind of like if you've been to a hockey game where they have those either shirts or hot dog cannons and they shoot them up into the crowd, you never know where they're going to land. But the new ideas don't have to be negative. So if you manage the change rather than just taking a shot or the ready, fire, aim kind of thing, if you manage the change and get input from everybody who's going to be impacted by the change, it can be can result in some good improvements. It can result in improvements also that people will support and try to make work. make effective. They'll try to make the change take hold, try to make the change useful. As we said before, if I decide it's going to be different, I call it variety, and if you tell me it's going to be different, I call it change. And the other neat thing that happens, and maybe you've seen it or perhaps you've done it yourself, if it wasn't my idea, I might be tempted to make sure it doesn't work. So that's why it's important to get people involved in making the change. And in fact, in ISO 45001, when you look in clause 5.1, what the top management requirements are, leadership must do certain things to demonstrate commitment. They have the same 9 or 10 that 9001 does, the quality standard in 511, but then they add 3 more clauses on worker consultation, worker involvement, worker participation. So when you're trying to get a new idea to take hold, definitely have a look at that standard 45001 clause 5.1, the last 3 points. It goes J, K, L, and M. They will give you some really good ideas on things to think about when you're trying to get something in going. And this could be a way for you to explain to leadership how they can get some of these ideas that are going to help the company get some of these ideas implemented in your organization. You have to use a tactic that suits your culture. And this comes back to the point I made earlier about making sure that your management system is stable but not rigid. And that's the rigidity is what causes issues and the pushback. And sometimes even you'll get pushback from unions depending on the circumstance and so on. So pick a tactic for impressing management that suits your culture and the management's culture. Find out where management, where leadership think it hurts, and show them with just a little bit of work, with a little bit of guidance from some of these standards, we might be able to put a few things in place that'll take the pressure off people. Keeping in mind psychosocial pressure as well, ISO 45003. Check it out sometime, talk about the cost of psychosocial health and safety at work. You will, the numbers are staggering, in the billions of dollars in lost time, lost effectiveness. But the worst thing is that the human who goes home on stress leave, the damage it does to their self-esteem, their feeling of worth, and so on it's incalculable. So use change agents if you have to. Hire people who know how to do this or can teach workshops on it. And as I said earlier, people love variety but aren't keen on change, and Doug backed me up on that as well. And you probably all can think of situations of your own where you've been forced to do something differently, and it's sometimes hard depending on your ego and how you're put together emotionally. It's sometimes hard to admit that, yeah, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea after all. So we looked at how do the standards connect with quality awards, how do I use standards to improve processes, and how do I sell ISO standards to leadership. So before I hand it back over to Doug to finish up, did anything resonate with you today or tonight, depending on what part of the world you're in? If there's anything you'd like to just sort of some ideas that anything that sort of piqued your curiosity, anything you'd like to find out a little bit more about from one of your ASQ programs, that would be great to hear from you.
Okay, we have one of them here. It says variety versus change.
Ah, good.
Kind of like the wording there.
Good. Yeah, it's something to think about. Like, we're always excited about how fabulous it's going to be after this new improvement happens, but not everybody's just that enthusiastic about change. Mm-hmm. Anything else in there?
Okay, don't be rigid.
Good. Stable, yes. Rigid, not so much. Mm-hmm. It's almost like pushing against the universe. If the universe is telling you that something's going to happen in a particular way, there's not much you can do about it. So go with, another way to say that might be go with the flow, but have your procedures written maybe focused more on what result you're trying to get rather than focused on step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I remember working with a company in Guelph, Ontario that made hoses, hose products. In Canada, there's an 80% chance that your barbecue has a hose from AccuFlex in Guelph. And they started down the ISO road 25 years ago. And what they thought they were going to get was that all their hose operator people who were running the various hose making machines would finally stop having a wide variety in waste, and everybody would learn how to do it the same way. That didn't work. It didn't fail completely, but they did not get the result they wanted. So ISO 9001 anyway is not designed to get everybody doing everything the same way. They were able to get a better handle on waste, and they were able to find amongst all the operators little things that they could do to get up and running faster. And then they realized that it wasn't quite as bad as they thought. Of course, they were in a lucky position of being able to recycle the waste back in through the top of the thing. I don't know if you've ever seen a hose made, but they take beads of some kind of rubber, plastic, whatever, and they melt the beads and then push them through a die, and as it's going through the die, it cools just enough to stay in the shape of a hose, and then it takes off. So they could never achieve the sort of predictability they wanted, and they will never until it becomes fully robotized. And that's the whole point of that statement, is make sure it's stable but flexible enough that people can do their activities their own way. Thanks. Anything else in there, Doug?
Oh yeah, we've been getting a whole long list of things. One of them is the part about selling. The speaker said had to do it before, but it's a nice reminder. One says a challenge that they've seen in the past is when senior management leadership changes in an organization, and there's a continuity break on the quality system, and it compromises it. Another comment talks about know your business, drive home improvement, and follow comply with your new procedures. Here's one. This is kind of deep. The idea that the essence of what you do now will continue after a QMS is implemented. Now that's intriguing, he says.
It is like planting a tree. Whatever kind of tree you plant, if you plant a willow, you'll get one result. If you plant an oak, you'll get a different result. Neat. Thanks for that. Beautiful.
Okay, we are collecting a few questions. This is great.
Okay.
So what's next?
If you want to do the questions, or if you'd like to finish up with your slides, I can turn it back to you. Or we want to do some more questions, whatever you like.
Let's get some general questions. I've been collecting questions all through the talk.
Oh, good. Take it away.
So why don't we just do that part here? Okay.
Yeah.
So looking back on our questions, here's one of them. So the purpose of an organization, is that what you consider a key element in the ISO standards? The purpose of the organization?
If you want to look up an author on that exact topic, John Seddon, S-E-D-D-O-N, he wrote, one of his classics was The Case Against ISO 9000. And he built or created an antidote to ISO 9000's earlier versions that were heavily documented. And I actually used it with 3 or 4 federal government departments when I was living in Ottawa. And he begins with that very word, purpose. What is the purpose of your organization? And if you can't define the purpose really clearly, you can't build a management system to support the purpose. And that's what all his auditing was about, is the system supporting our purpose. And keeping really clear on the purpose is very valuable to any organization. And in fact, when you think of context and scope, that's getting pretty close to that word, purpose, scope particularly. Thanks, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so next, we got a couple of these. When is the next revision of ISO 9001?
Well, sadly, my crystal ball is covered with snow. They typically, we should be looking for committees being formed right about now. They're supposed to review them every 5 years, which would have been 2020. The typical revisions were 7, like 87, 94, 2000, 2008, 2015. But I would be willing, if I were a betting man, I don't think you're going to see a massive change. It'll be just like the 94 version was a tweak of the 87, the 2008 was a tweak of the 2000, the 2015 was a major overhaul. And I think the fact that they've started to design all certifiable or registerable, whatever the word is, standards on the high-level structure, I don't think you'll see any change in the high-level structure now, but you'll see little tweaks here and there, I think. I hope you don't see new requirements for more documentation. That's not going to help anything.
No, probably not. Here's one. What are the major reasons you find for organizations that choose to abandon or lose their ISO certification?
Well, I don't see many people choosing to lose it, but we do see 6-7% a year, what do they call it, deregistering themselves. And I have to say, from my personal experience, and it's not vast, but it's long but not deep, I suppose you'd say, they just don't see the value in it. And it's often a case where the organization began the journey because one of their customers said, I can't buy from you any longer unless you're ISO certified. So their approach was, what's the cheapest, fastest, easiest way we can do this? And those systems turn out to be a liability rather than an asset. I had the pleasure earlier this year of working with a home care provider here in Southern Ontario, and they just heard about ISO and they thought, let's try this to see if it might help us run our business better, as opposed to saying, well, gosh, we got to get certified to get on this list. So it was just great working with a company that really wanted to use the standard to figure out a better way to do things. So I guess in a nutshell, if you have to do it, you're forced to do it, you only do it for the certificate. That's the most likely time you're going to either deregister yourself, or if you just don't get it, you won't be getting through the audits very well, and finally you just give up. Thanks. Good question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Well, they're all good questions.
They are good ones. Here's one that's kind of long, but I'm going to read the whole statement so you get the gist of what he was saying. A few years ago, I saw a director complaining that standards are expensive, time-consuming, and do not guarantee quality because even with ISO certification, his company is failing to achieve customer satisfaction. What are the limits of ISO standards on quality levels? And I believe that the certified corporation that doesn't keep efforts up over time and maintain their culture for quality improvement represents an immature company. Now, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I really agree with the statement, and I have seen that various situations so many times. The value, if an organization sees the value and understands, as the earlier person mentioned, this idea of purpose. If you really understand your purpose and truly believe in the value you're bringing to people and focus on customer requirements, that's your purpose, satisfying customers or meeting customer requirements, in fact, if you think of that as your purpose, then you'll sort of avoid that expense that director was talking about, because the value will come out of having a management system when the purpose is really clear to everybody in the organization, and everybody has the tools they need, the skills they need, the equipment they need, the work environment they need to fulfill that purpose. But it's absolutely true. I've seen it many times where people look at the cost and they don't see a return. Now, sometimes they don't see a return because they're not measuring the results the way they could be. So that's important too. So it's a whole combination of things, but it's definitely a fact, and we see it so many times that they're the ones where they're spending all this money and really not seeing anything. So I think just listening to the people in the organization, continually finding ways to make processes work better, looking at programs like Don's Organizational Excellence, using these standards to meet the requirements of their Baldrige or Canadian Works for Excellence, whatever. Use the standards, use them for a guide. Like even you might even want to try using the standard without getting certified. See if you get any value out of it. That might be another way to sort of defuse that too. Thanks. I hope that helped.
Okay, thank you. You know, we are getting a lot of really good questions, but unfortunately we're kind of getting to the end. And what I think we're going to do here, we're going to give you Jim's email address. Okay, and if you have questions that were not answered here, you may send Jim an email. His email address will be in the note you receive documenting your RUs and giving you a link to watch the video. Okay, you'll see that in 48 hours. So we want to remind people that this is being brought to you by ASQ. The Quality Management Division is a portion of ASQ. And if you join ASQ, you'll get access to a great many other materials like this. We hope that you can see this. We have new webinars coming up. We've got 2 of them currently on the books, one in January and one in February. We're planning 2 more in 2022, one on Bloom's taxonomy, one on generations in the workplace. We're going to plan to do one every month. So look for that. There's a QR code there. If you take a picture of that with your cell phone, it will take you to the page where we list all of our upcoming webinars. If you are an ASQ member, you can continue this conversation at the ASQ's My ASQ community. 28, the number on the end, that is the Quality Management Division. So you can find us in there under My ASQ communities. If you want to volunteer for the Quality Management Division, Carol Loveland is always looking for more volunteers. So we appreciate, sending a message through to her, and she's feeding people into our Quality Management Division has about 50 council members who operate this whole thing. So we basically just want to thank all of you, okay, for attending. Remember, if you have more questions, post them, email them to Jim, and he'll provide answers after the talk. If you want the copy of the slides, then send Jim an email. He can send you a PDF file.
Absolutely.
The email will have his email address. And again, it will also document your 0.1 RUs earned for this event. So hopefully you'll be able to join us on a future talk. And we'd wish all of you a great holiday. Thank you to Jim for giving us this talk, and thanks to each and every one of you. And goodbye for today. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Doug, and thanks to all of you who took time out of your day today to come and join us. Great to meet you all. Thanks.